Welcome to ShadowLore. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button, give the video a thumbs up, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. Story 1. A Night at the Old Pub. It was one of those slow Friday nights, the kind where the regulars fill the bar stools and the bartender knows everyone by name. I was sitting at my usual spot in the Rusty Nail, a small, dimly lit pub tucked away on a forgotten street in my town. This place was a relic of the past, with its worn leather stools and stained wooden countertops. It was the kind of bar that seemed frozen in time, and that's probably why I liked it. I had just finished my second drink when the door creaked open. In walked a man I had never seen before. He was tall, with greasy, unkempt hair, and his clothes looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. He had a wild look in his eyes, like he was searching for something. Or someone. The regulars all turned to glance at him before quickly going back to their conversations. It wasn't unusual for strangers to wander in, but this guy felt different. He sat at the far end of the bar, keeping his head down as he ordered a drink. The bartender, Pete, poured him a whiskey and asked how his night was going. The man didn't respond. He just stared into his glass, swirling the amber liquid before taking a sip. Something about him made me uneasy, so I decided to mind my own business and focus on my drink. After a few minutes, I noticed the stranger pulling something out of his pocket. It was an old, tattered photograph. He stared at it intensely, like it held some dark secret. Pete, always the friendly type, tried striking up a conversation again, asking if the man was looking for someone. The guy finally spoke, his voice low and raspy. "I'm looking for her," he said, placing the photo on the bar. I could barely make out the image, but it seemed to be a young woman, smiling, maybe in her 20s. Pete glanced at the picture and shook his head. "Can't say I've seen her. Maybe try the other bars downtown?" The man's grip tightened on the photo, and his expression grew darker. "She was here," he muttered, almost to himself. "I know she was here." At that point, I was starting to get uncomfortable. The atmosphere in the bar shifted. The regulars who had been laughing and chatting just moments ago were now speaking in hushed tones, casting nervous glances toward the stranger. There was something off about this guy, something that made everyone on edge. Suddenly, the man stood up, his chair screeching against the wooden floor. He shoved the photo back into his pocket and stormed out of the bar without another word. The door slammed shut behind him, and the tension in the room eased a little, but no one said a word. We all just sat there, processing what had just happened. Pete, always the optimist, tried to lighten the mood. "Well, that was something. Another round. Anyone?" A few of us chuckled, but the unease lingered. An hour later, as I was finishing up my drink and getting ready to leave, I heard the door creak open again. Expecting to see another late-night straggler, I turned around, but my blood ran cold when I saw the same man standing there. His eyes were wild, more so than before, and his hand was gripping something, a knife. Without saying a word, he stormed toward Pete, who was frozen in shock. Before anyone could react, the man lunged over the bar, slashing at Pete's arm. Chaos erupted as people scrambled to get out of the way, chairs and glasses crashing to the floor. I grabbed a bottle from the bar and swung it at the man's head, but he dodged, his eyes locking onto mine. There was something primal, almost animalistic in his gaze. The next few seconds felt like an eternity. Somehow, Pete managed to grab a baseball bat he kept behind the bar and swung it at the man, knocking him back. The knife clattered to the floor, and the stranger collapsed, unconscious. The police arrived shortly after, and the man was taken away in handcuffs. They later told us that he had been searching for his sister, who had gone missing years ago. He believed she had been taken, and that the bar held some kind of clue. But the scariest part? The woman in the photo looked exactly like one of the bar's old regulars. Someone who had died in a car accident just a few months earlier. I haven't been back to the Rusty Nail since that night. Every time I think about it, I get a sick feeling in my stomach. It's not the knife or the attack that haunts me. It's the look in that man's eyes, the desperation, the madness. I can't shake the feeling that, in his mind, he truly believed the bar held the answer to his sister's disappearance. And maybe, just maybe, he was right. Story 2. The Last Call. It was a chilly autumn night when I found myself at the Hangman's Noose, a dive bar known for its cheap drinks and gritty atmosphere. I had just moved to the city and was eager to explore the nightlife. The bar had an old wooden sign creaking in the wind, and its dimly lit interior was filled with the sounds of clinking glasses and muffled conversations. I settled onto a bar stool, ordered a whiskey, and took a moment to observe the crowd. Most of the patrons were locals, weathered faces buried in their drinks, sharing stories and laughter. But one guy caught my attention. He was sitting alone in a corner booth, his eyes darting around the room as if he were waiting for someone. After a couple of drinks, my curiosity got the better of me. I approached the booth and asked if he was okay. He looked up, startled, and quickly waved me off. "I'm fine," he replied, but there was a tremor in his voice. His hands fidgeted with a glass, and he seemed lost in thought. I tried to shake off the awkwardness and returned to the bar. A few minutes later, I noticed the bartender, a burly man with a thick beard, whispering to another patron. Their eyes flickered toward the man in the booth. The atmosphere shifted, a sense of unease hanging in the air. As the night progressed, the bar grew busier, but the man remained in his booth, his gaze increasingly frantic. It was around midnight when I heard the door swing open. A group of rowdy guys burst in, their laughter echoing through the bar. They were clearly drunk and looking for trouble. Without warning, they spotted the man in the booth and began shouting at him. "Hey, you! You think you can just sit there and ignore us?" Their taunts were loud and brash, and I felt a wave of sympathy for the man. He looked terrified, glancing toward the door, but the group advanced. The bartender stepped in, trying to defuse the situation. "Guys, leave him alone. He's not bothering anyone." But the drunken group didn't care. They were in a mood to stir up chaos. In a flash, the leader of the group lunged at the man in the booth, grabbing him by the collar and yanking him out of his seat. The room fell silent, tension crackling in the air. I could feel the collective breath being held, everyone anticipating what would happen next. "Why don't you tell us what you're hiding, huh?" the leader sneered, pushing the man back against the wall. The man stuttered, struggling to find his voice. I'm not hiding anything," he managed to say, his voice trembling. At that moment, the bartender had had enough. He stepped forward, brandishing a baseball bat. "Back off. This isn't your playground." The rowdy guys laughed at his attempt to protect the man, but their bravado began to wane. The situation escalated quickly. One of the group members swung a punch at the bartender, missing and crashing into the table. The whole bar erupted into chaos, with people shouting and trying to escape the sudden violence. I felt a surge of adrenaline and knew I had to act. I grabbed a nearby beer bottle and smashed it on the counter, rushing toward the chaos. As I approached, I saw the man in the booth frantically reaching into his jacket. "Get back!" he shouted, and I froze, my heart racing. Before I could react, he pulled out a small revolver and aimed it at the group. "Stay away from me!" he yelled, his voice steady but filled with fear. The entire bar fell silent again, the tension now palpable. The leader of the group sneered, "You think you can scare us with that toy?" But the man didn't waver. "I'm not playing, I'll use it." I could see the desperation in his eyes, and suddenly it all made sense. This wasn't just a random confrontation. This man was in real danger. Then, as if on cue, the police sirens echoed outside. The drunken group's bravado shattered, and they started to retreat. "Let's get out of here!" the leader shouted, and they scrambled for the exit. In the midst of the chaos, the man kept the gun trained on the door, shaking but resolute. The bartender stepped cautiously toward him, hands raised. "Put it down, man. You're safe now." Slowly, the man lowered the revolver, his body trembling. The police burst into the bar just as the group slipped out the door. They quickly apprehended them outside, and the tension began to ease. The man sat back down in the booth, visibly shaken. As the police questioned him, I overheard snippets of his story. He had been threatened by those men over a debt he owed, and he came to the bar for safety, but it had turned into a nightmare. My heart ached for him. He was just trying to enjoy a drink like the rest of us. The night wore on, and I couldn't shake the image of that man holding a gun in a bar, meant for laughter and camaraderie. It was a stark reminder of how quickly things can turn dark. I left the hangman's noose that night, feeling unsettled, knowing that the line between safety and danger can vanish in an instant. I never returned to that bar again. The memory of that night still lingers, reminding me of the shadows lurking behind even the most unassuming places. Story 3. Whispers in the Dark. It was late February when I decided to meet some friends at the Black Lantern, a bar known for its eclectic decor and live music. The atmosphere was always lively, with people dancing and enjoying the dim lighting that made everything feel a bit more mysterious. I had been there a few times before, and while it was a fun spot, there was always an undercurrent of something unsettling. As I walked in, the familiar sounds of laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. I scanned the room for my friends, and spotted them near the back, waving me over. They had a table near the stage, and as I joined them, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The band was setting up, and the bartender, a wiry man with a crooked smile, was pouring drinks. I ordered a beer and settled in, but throughout the night, I noticed a figure at the far end of the bar, a woman dressed in black. She had long, dark hair that obscured her face, and she sat alone, staring into her drink. As the music started, the band kicked off a lively set, but I couldn't help but watch the woman. There was something eerie about her presence. She never moved, her gaze fixed on the glass in front of her. I turned to my friends, trying to shake off the feeling. "Who's that woman at the bar?" I asked. My friend, Sarah, shrugged. "I don't know. She's been here a while, though. Kind of creepy, right?" I nodded, feeling a chill run down my spine. The night continued, and I tried to focus on the music, but every now and then, I'd steal glances at the woman. It was like she was in a trance, completely detached from the lively atmosphere around her. About an hour into the night, the band took a break, and I excused myself to go to the bathroom. As I walked through the dimly lit corridor, I felt a strange pull toward the woman. Something compelled me to talk to her. I approached the bar, hesitating for a moment before sitting down next to her. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Are you okay? You've been here alone for a while." She turned her head slightly, her face still mostly hidden. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice low and almost melodic. There was an edge to it that sent shivers down my spine. "You sure?" "It seems like you're lost in thought," I pressed, feeling oddly drawn to her. She looked at me then, and for a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of her eyes. They were dark and hollow. "Sometimes it's easier to drown in the drink than to face the world," she said, taking a slow sip from her glass. Before I could respond, she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Do you want to know a secret?" I felt a mix of curiosity and unease. "Sure," I replied, half expecting some sort of joke. "There are whispers here. Do you hear them?" Her eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a chill run through me. I glanced around, but the bar was bustling, music playing, laughter echoing. "Whispers?" I echoed, trying to maintain my composure. "Yes," she insisted, her voice barely above a whisper. "If you listen closely, you'll hear them. They tell stories, terrible stories of the things that happen in this bar." My heart raced. I thought she was just trying to get a rise out of me, but the intensity in her eyes felt genuine. "What kind of stories?" I asked, genuinely intrigued despite the fear creeping in. She leaned even closer, her breath warm against my ear. "The stories of those who came here and never left. They say that when the music plays, the spirits of the lost come to join the living." I couldn't help but shiver at her words, the ambiance of the bar suddenly feeling heavier. Before I could respond, she straightened up and turned back to her drink, a cryptic smile on her lips. I felt a mixture of curiosity and dread. Okay, this is getting a bit weird, I thought. Just then, the band resumed playing, and the room erupted in cheers. I decided it was time to head back to my friends. As I stood up, I glanced back at the woman, but she was gone. Her seat empty, the glass still half full. Confused, I made my way back to my table. "Where'd you go?" Sarah asked, a hint of concern in her voice. "I was just talking to that woman at the bar," I replied, but as I pointed, I realized she had vanished completely. She was just sitting there. My friends exchanged glances, and Sarah's expression turned serious. "You shouldn't talk to people like that. It's not safe." I shrugged it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in the air. The band continued to play, and we danced and laughed, but every now and then, I'd catch myself glancing at the spot where the woman had sat, hoping to catch another glimpse of her. As the night wore on, I decided to head outside for some fresh air. The cold air hit my face, and I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the strange encounter. But when I turned to go back inside, I saw her standing at the edge of the alleyway, her silhouette barely illuminated by the streetlight. "Do you hear them now?" she called out, her voice echoing in the night. I felt a shiver run down my spine, and the memories of her words flooded back to me. Before I could respond, she vanished into the shadows, leaving me standing there, heart pounding and mind racing. I hurried back inside, determined to forget the unsettling encounter. But her words lingered. To this day, I wonder about that woman and the stories she spoke of. Every time I pass the Black Lantern, I can't help but feel a chill, half expecting to see her lurking in the shadows, whispering secrets of the night to those brave enough to listen. Story 4: The Ghost of Old Charlie. It was a sweltering summer evening when I found myself at the Rusty Anchor, a bar perched on the edge of the river. I had heard rumors about this place being haunted, but I was more interested in the cheap drinks and the promise of live music. The bar was known for its old-school charm, with wooden beams and vintage nautical decorations that made it feel like a step back in time. As I settled onto a bar stool and ordered a beer, I could feel the excitement in the air. The band was setting up, and the regulars were already starting to gather. But even amidst the laughter and chatter, I felt an undercurrent of unease, something that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. While waiting for my drink, I overheard a couple of patrons talking about Old Charlie, the ghost of a fisherman who was said to haunt the bar. According to the locals, Charlie had drowned in the river many years ago, and his spirit lingered in the bar, often making himself known by moving objects or appearing as a shadowy figure. I chuckled to myself, thinking it was just a silly tale to entertain the tourists. But as the night went on and the band started playing, I began to notice odd things happening. Glasses would suddenly clink together without anyone touching them, and the lights flickered intermittently. My friends and I exchanged amused glances, chalking it up to the drunken revelry. About an hour in, I decided to step outside for a breath of fresh air. The moon was high, casting a silvery glow over the river. As I leaned against the railing, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The night was eerily quiet, the sounds of the bar fading into the background. Suddenly, I heard a soft voice whispering my name. Tom. Tom. I froze, my heart racing. The voice was faint but distinctly clear, sending chills down my spine. I turned around, but there was no one there. The air felt thick, as if something was watching me from the shadows. Trying to calm myself, I returned to the bar, brushing off the unsettling experience. But when I got back inside, I noticed a change in the atmosphere. The music had stopped, and everyone was staring toward the far end of the room, where a figure stood, a shadowy outline that seemed to flicker in and out of focus. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. The figure looked like an old man, dressed in tattered clothes, his face obscured by darkness. My pulse quickened as I realized that everyone else was frozen in place, eyes wide with disbelief. It was as if time had stopped, and all eyes were drawn to the ghostly apparition. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the figure faded away, and the bar erupted into a mix of gasps and nervous laughter. "Did you see that?" someone shouted. "Old Charlie is here." The mood shifted, and what had started as light-hearted fun turned into a tense atmosphere as people shared their own ghost stories. Feeling a mix of fear and curiosity, I decided to ask the bartender about the rumors. He was a stout man with a grizzled beard, and when I approached him, he leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "You saw him, didn't you?" he said, his eyes darting toward the spot where the figure had been. "That was old Charlie. He shows up from time to time, especially when the river is restless." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "What does he want?" I asked, genuinely intrigued. The bartender shrugged. "No one knows for sure. Some say he's looking for something he lost, a piece of himself, perhaps. Others believe he just likes to remind us he's still here." As the night wore on, the energy in the bar shifted. People were both thrilled and terrified by the encounter. I couldn't shake the feeling that old Charlie was watching us, lingering in the corners, waiting for the right moment to make himself known again. Later, as I prepared to leave, I took one last look around. The bar was still buzzing with excitement, but I could sense an eerie stillness in the air. Just as I stepped outside, I felt a sudden chill envelop me, and I turned to look back at the bar. In the window, I saw a fleeting glimpse of the old man's shadowy figure once more, a look of longing etched into his face. For a moment, our eyes locked, and I felt a strange connection, a shared understanding of loss and memory. Then he was gone, leaving only the ripples of the river behind. I walked away from the rusty anchor, a mix of fear and fascination swirling in my mind. I had come for a night of fun, but what I took away was an encounter with the unknown. A brush with a spirit that reminded me that some stories never truly fade away. Story 5. The Last Drink. It was a rainy Thursday night when I decided to check out the Gloomy Hollow, a bar that had a reputation for serving the strongest cocktails in town. It was one of those places that felt more like a haunted house than a bar, with flickering candles and shadowy corners that seemed to swallow the light. I entered and was immediately hit by the smell of damp wood and something else. Something metallic that made my stomach churn. The bar was almost empty, save for a few scattered patrons nursing their drinks. I took a seat at the far end of the bar and ordered a drink, eager to try one of their infamous concoctions. As I sipped my cocktail, I overheard a couple of locals at the bar sharing stories about a man named Jack, who had supposedly died in the very bar I was sitting in. According to the legend, Jack had been a regular there, a charming guy who would buy everyone drinks and tell wild tales. One fateful night, he had gotten into an argument with another patron, which escalated into a fight that ended with Jack falling and hitting his head. He never made it home that night. The more they talked, the more I felt a sense of unease. I glanced around the dimly lit room, noticing the way the shadows danced along the walls. My drink was potent, and as I finished it, I felt a strange heaviness settling over me. Suddenly, I heard a soft voice behind me. "Can I buy you a drink?" I turned to find a man with disheveled hair and a lopsided grin. His eyes were bright, but there was something off about him, an intensity that made me wary. Thanks, but I'm good," I replied, hoping he would take the hint. Instead, he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You know, they say Jack still haunts this place. He's looking for someone to keep him company." I laughed nervously, trying to dismiss the comment. "That's just a story, right?" The man leaned back, studying me. "Maybe, or maybe not. I've seen him." His voice was steady, and I could see a hint of sincerity in his eyes. "He appears to people who are lost, or who drink too much." A chill ran down my spine, and I decided it was time to change the subject. "What's your favorite drink here?" I asked, trying to steer the conversation away from the unsettling topic. He shrugged. "It depends on what you're looking for. Some come for a good time, while others are just trying to forget." I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, and I forced a smile. "Well, I think I'll stick to the cocktails." As the night wore on, the atmosphere grew thicker. The bar was still mostly empty, but every now and then, I could feel a presence at my side. It was as if someone were watching me, though every time I looked, there was no one there. After finishing another drink, I decided to head to the restroom. As I made my way through the narrow corridor, the lights flickered overhead, and I felt a sudden wave of nausea. The air felt heavy, as if something was pressing down on me. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts, but when I reached the restroom, I paused at the mirror. That's when I saw him. Jack's reflection appeared behind me, a shadowy figure with hollow eyes and a forlorn expression. My heart raced and I spun around, but there was nothing there, just the empty hallway. I hurried back to the bar, desperate to shake off the feeling. When I returned, the man was still there, grinning like he knew something I didn't. "Did you see him?" he asked, his voice low. "What?" I managed to stammer. "Jack. He likes to make himself known to those who drink too much," he said, his grin widening. "But it's too late for you now." I felt a wave of panic wash over me. "What do you mean?" The man leaned closer, his expression shifting from playful to serious. "Once he finds you, he won't let you leave until you share a drink with him." Before I could respond, the lights flickered again, and I felt a chill sweep through the bar. The shadows deepened, and I could hear the soft sound of someone laughing, a distant echo that seemed to come from all directions. The laughter grew louder, almost mocking. Suddenly I felt an icy hand on my shoulder. I turned, my heart pounding, but it was just the bartender. "You good?" he asked, a look of concern on his face. Yeah, just a little dizzy," I replied, trying to steady myself. The man beside me had vanished, and I was left feeling more unsettled than ever. I decided it was time to leave. I paid my tab and stepped outside into the cool night air. But as I walked away from the gloomy hollow, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jack was still watching me, his presence lingering in the shadows. The rain began to fall lightly, and I glanced back at the bar, half expecting to see Jack standing in the doorway, waiting for me to return. I quickened my pace, the laughter echoing in my mind, a reminder that some stories cling to you long after you think they've been left behind. To this day, I've never returned to that bar. The memory of that night and the encounter with Jack still haunts me, reminding me that the line between the living and the dead can sometimes blur, especially when you're lost in the darkness of a drink. Thanks so much for sticking around till the end of these 5 true bar horror stories. I hope you found them as chilling as I did. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Your support really helps the channel grow, and I truly appreciate it. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.